All right, let's just dive right in. We're about to explore one of the deepest mysteries out there. What is consciousness, and what does it tell us about reality itself? We're going to be looking at ancient symbols, some pretty controversial physics, and some seriously mind-bending philosophy to try and untangle this incredible web. It really all comes down to this one simple, yet kind of impossible question. What is this feeling of being you? Of having a unique perspective, of being a self. It's the most fundamental thing we know. But the moment you try to grab it, to pin it down, it just slips right through your fingers. And that's exactly where our journey begins. To navigate our inner worlds, humans have always needed maps. And for those really profound, deep spiritual experiences, we use powerful symbols. So our first stop is one of the most famous of them all, the coiled serpent. So if you look up Kundalini online, you're going to see this, what you could call the standard model. It's this incredibly potent image, right? A serpent of cosmic energy coiled at the base of your spine. And when it's awakened, it's said to shoot up through 7 energy centers, the chakras, leading to enlightenment. It's a really compelling map for a profound internal journey. But here's where it gets really interesting. This specific image, well, it isn't as ancient as you might think. According to historian Anya Foxon, it's actually a modern hybrid. It was born when Western esotericists, back in the colonial era, tried to understand Indian traditions by, well, comparing them to their own ideas. They created this fusion, a kind of magic of comparison. And this comparison, it wasn't always a perfect match. In fact, as you can see here, sometimes it was completely backward. In South Asian alchemy, fiery sulfur was seen as feminine, the creative energy of the goddess. But over in European alchemy, sulfur and the sun, totally masculine symbols. So the core meanings were literally reversed in translation. And that brings us to the crucial point. Even if the symbolic map we use today is, as Foxon calls it, a jumble of faulty comparisons, it's still pointing to something real. Underneath all the symbols and the mixed-up history, there's an experience so powerful that it demands an explanation, whether that's through ancient symbols or through modern science. So, let's pivot. We're going to move from those symbolic maps to scientific ones. Can we actually find consciousness somewhere in the physical brain? For decades, the answer seemed to be yes. It's in the connections between neurons. But a pretty radical theory suggests we've been looking in completely the wrong place. And this is it, the Orchestrated Objective Reduction Theory, or ORC-OR for short. It was proposed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. And it is a wild idea. It says that consciousness isn't something that just emerges from the brain's complex wiring, but that it's a fundamental quantum process happening at a much, much smaller scale. And this visual really illustrates the shift perfectly. On the left, you've got the classic view. Consciousness is in the brain's software, the signals jumping between synapses. But on the right, that's where ORC-OR is looking. Inside the microtubules, the tiny protein scaffolding that makes up the neuron's skeleton. The theory suggests consciousness isn't in the software, it's built into the brain's fundamental hardware. I mean, the goals of this theory are incredibly ambitious. It's not just saying the brain uses quantum effects, it's saying the brain is a quantum computer. It's trying to tackle the hard problem. Why do we have subjective feelings at all? And it even offers a potential physical basis for free will, something that isn't just predetermined or purely random. Okay, so this theory is definitely controversial, and for a very good reason. The number one objection from mainstream science is that the brain is just the wrong kind of environment. It's warm, wet, and noisy. It's a chaotic place where these super delicate quantum states should fall apart almost instantly. That's a process called decoherence. It's a huge hurdle for sure, but the story might not end there. If we take a quantum theory of mind seriously, even just for a minute, it forces us to look at the absolute strangest parts of physics. Because if our consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, what does that mean for the nature of reality itself? Well, it leads us straight to ideas like the many worlds interpretation. So the many worlds idea basically says that every time a quantum event has more than one possible outcome, the universe splits. All the possibilities become real, each in its own separate branch. Now, this solves some tricky problems in physics, but it creates a massive philosophical one. If every single outcome actually happens, what on earth does it mean to say that one outcome is 99% probable and another is only 1% probable? This quote from physicist N. Graham just nails the problem. Think about it.
If a 99% probable event and a 1% probable event both just split the world into two branches, a simple count gives you a 50-50 outcome. The numbers, the probabilities, they seem to lose all meaning. It feels like our real-world experience of chance is just some kind of illusion.
So this is the core paradox, right? If every possible future is just as real as any other, then the whole concept of chance, which is so fundamental to how we live our lives, it seems to completely evaporate. How do you solve that without just throwing out the physics?
Well, one potential solution, coming from philosopher Simon Saunders, is just as radical as the problem it's trying to solve. It suggests that to save the idea of probability, we have to completely change how we think about time, the universe, and even ourselves.
And look, physics has forced us to make this kind of shift before. Einstein's theory of relativity completely shattered our intuitive idea of a single universal now. It taught us that time is relative. The new idea here is to apply that same relational logic to the self. The self isn't a single thing that moves through time. It's a pattern of events. So how does this actually fix probability? Okay, let's walk through it. The old way of thinking is to make a statement like, I will observe spin up. But in a many worlds universe, that's just false, because a version of you will also see spin down. The relational approach changes the statement. It says, the probability relative to me right now that a future version of me observes spin up is 50%. See the difference? It's not a statement about one definite outcome, but about the relationship between your present self and a possible future self. And here is the truly mind-bending takeaway from all of this. You, the you that exists right this second, you don't have one single definite future. Instead, your present self exists in this complex, probabilistic relationship with an entire branching tree of all your possible future selves. You're the trunk and they are all the branches. Okay, so we've gone from ancient serpent to quantum microtubules to branching multiple selves. What is the thread that connects these totally separate worlds? Well, it's an idea that we actually ran into right at the beginning. In every single case, the breakthrough, the new way of understanding, came from the act of comparison. We created a new understanding of Kundalini by comparing different spiritual traditions. We're trying to understand consciousness by comparing the brain not to a classic computer but to a quantum one. And we saved probability by comparing our present self to a whole garden of forking paths. Remember this quote? In comparison, a magic dwells. The historian Jonathan Z. Smith actually meant it as a criticism, that comparison invents connections instead of just finding them. But maybe he was more right than he even knew. Maybe that invention, that magic, is precisely how we build a world we can actually understand. So here's the bottom line. Our maps of reality aren't just passive photographs of what's out there. It doesn't matter if it's a spiritual symbol like the serpent, a scientific theory like Orca-War, or a philosophical concept of the self. We are constantly building our reality by creating these incredible webs of comparison and relationship. And all of that leaves us with one final, and I think pretty provocative question. Is the world a solid, independent thing that we're all just slowly uncovering piece by piece? Or is reality itself something more like a story? A vast, intricate narrative that we are constantly writing and rewriting, just by the simple, magical act of comparing one thing to another?